ready. And as you know, this is basically quiet lecture time while I deliver the information. Afterwards, we'll have time for questions, and we will definitely look at people's charts to see where is Jupiter in Cancer in your chart. So today is the Soul Path Community class, our Friday class. Jupiter moving into Cancer after it's been in Gemini for a year. And this shift is happening just in a couple of days on June 9th. Here's the chart for the ingress. And you can see that as it moves into Cancer, it will be very closely conjunct Mercury. Now, Mercury is the planet of communication, how we think, how we process data. And Jupiter, which we'll go into a great deal of detail, has in some ways a lot to do with Mercury because we use our Mercury function to learn the things we need to learn that contribute to our sense of meaning in life. And that is the fundamental big picture meaning of Jupiter is that, through Jupiter, we are understanding truth, understanding meaning, developing philosophies that work for us, developing philosophies in the world, what our social structures are guided by. And we always look at an ingress chart to see what else is happening at the time, because in some way that flavors whatever this thing is doing, whether it's the ingress of the sun into a new sign at the beginning of a month, or some other bigger picture energy, Pluto moving into a sign, what's going on. So we see some nice trines here and very strong. You see the level of the lines here being so thick speaks to how exact these trines are. Moon in Sagittarius. Sagittarius is the sign that's ruled by Jupiter. And the moon moving quickly is moving the light around. It has to do with our emotional sensitivities. In ancient times, the moon represented intuition and all the unseen forces before Neptune took that over. But here's Neptune in Aries, conjunct Saturn. So this is this new energy that's building this year that forms its exact cycle launch next year in 2020, 2026. And, and Neptune, high frequency imagination, unconditional love, soul centering, oneness, bliss, that high frequency, we are one. The soul is connected to the entire cosmos, and we are connecting to Saturn at this point in time to build something new into our frequency. And of course, there's always the shadow side of everything. We can have lies and manipulation, confusion, and overwhelm. But I do like to focus on what it is we're meant to have, and so that we can work with it. So the moon is drawing our attention to that Saturn Neptune as something about the meaning. And we also have a very intense square between the Jupiter Mercury and the Saturn Neptune. Now, square represents tension that these two energies don't mesh together very well and requires some new thinking, something creative to bring them together. Jupiter and Mercury in Cancer, we already know that Cancer sign has a lot to do with nurturing and healing. And Aries energy is fiery and asks us to begin something. It's not so emotionally centered. So somehow we're having to bring together feeling and this action, go for it, fiery, independent energy. Cancer is like that picture at the beginning with the dog and the kitten nestling together. If we had a picture for Aries, we know that it would be moving fast, it would be intense, it would be brave, courageous, and fiery. The other trine that we have that's pretty significant is Mars in the sign of Leo, connected to Chiron and Aries. So Chiron in Aries is continuing its journey to support us in taking action, being brave and courageous in these very intense times. And Mars in Leo is also about going forward. It's the Aries planet, and it's also operating through the fire sign of Leo, which is, similar to Aries in certain ways in terms of fire, going for things, a gut level instinct. But Leo carries a bit more of a sense of power and leadership. Aries goes it alone and just braves it out, and just makes it happen. Leo is more likely to think of, hey, I'm entitled to enjoy myself and relax in this life. And, maybe some of my minions can do some of these things. I don't have to do it all myself. And also Mars in Leo says, I can be really creative. And so we'll see that with this ingress of Jupiter into Cancer, we've got some very fundamental connections that are supportive. The moon is also in a sextile with Pluto, and Pluto in Aquarius, as we know at this time, is unearthing the shadow of all things Aquarius. Our revolution and awakening and, the progress we want to see. Well, what are we seeing? We are seeing the underbelly, what stops us from having that. We're seeing those who would, change our world into an authoritarian regime where nobody has any rights. And then we have the fact that Pluto right now is in a square with Venus in Taurus. So again, we get this other piece. Venus in Taurus wants to relate in a way that is sensual and secure and steady. And Pluto in Aquarius is part of this feeling we have right now that everything is changing and we don't know where anything is going to go. And that's one of the things we often say as astrologers. I mean, it sounds a little bit like a cop-out, but it is true that if you think you can predict something with Aquarius or the planet Uranus, if you think you've got an idea what's going to happen, you are probably wrong, because the thing that will ultimately happen is unpredictable. That is the nature of Uranus and Aquarius. There can be 10 possible outcomes, and yet somehow some 11th outcome shows up and nobody was imagining this would happen. So, an example of this right now, I would say, is that although many people imagined that the bromance between Trump and Elon Musk would not last very long, they're both big, powerful, ego-based personalities. Nobody thought that that was going to be a forever friendship. But I don't know that we imagined that it would be disrupted in the very intense way that happened yesterday. Now, previous dates for reflection of when Jupiter was in Cancer, the last time, June 2013 to July 2014 is usually about a year. Before that, 2001 to 2002. 1989 to 1990. These August date, I'm going to tell you right now, looks weird, right? Because it's a year-long transit. And here we have August 20th, 77 to April 79. That sounds like it's almost 2 years. But in both cases, there were retrogrades of Jupiter. And I was using the first date that it came into Cancer and the last date that it came out of Cancer into Leo. So there was a lot of back and forth for quite a few months there on both sides. And then a more typical experience, 1966 to 1967. So you might want to take a screenshot of those dates or just, write them down and ponder them, because what happened in your life in those years, it's usually about a 1-year process that Jupiter is in a sign. What happened then in some way may relate to what happens now. And this can be some level of preparation for you. Where will Jupiter bring its expansion and its blessings in this upcoming year for you? I have discovered in my own life that every single one of these times represented a major move for me. And Cancer rules my fourth house of home and family. is where I have the South Node conjunct Uranus, Uranus radical changes, moving. And so, big moves were associated with every one of these transits for me. So I'm kind of sitting here looking at my life and wondering, okay, are we going to have the same thing this time? And as some of you may know, I've been talking about wishing to move for quite a few years now. And now that I've sort of settled in and thinking, oh, well, maybe I'll stay, I'm seeing Jupiter come into Cancer. Now, unpacking this, in terms of what Jupiter means, big picture for the world, but also for us personally. We'll start with what I'd already said. Jupiter represents the part of us that seeks meaning in life, truth. You know, um, we develop our beliefs and our philosophies. And how do we do that? Well, sometimes it's through higher education. Sometimes it's through religion or the study of philosophies. Many times our Jupiter comes with just this basic sense of faith and hope. And we just believe something without necessarily any real data to back it up. And one of the things that will happen with Jupiter processes, because it expands. I mean, that's really the core of it is Jupiter expands what it touches. And sometimes it expands too much. And if you can think about if you've ever baked bread and you've got that yeast in it and it rises up and it doubles and gets even bigger, it's kind of spilling out of the bowl maybe as this big dome. But you press your fingers in it and it just flattens because what was in there was just yeast air. And it's not really an expanded thing. It's not thick all the way through. A souffle is another example. It comes out of the oven beautiful and big, but it doesn't take very long before it kind of flattens in, at least somewhat. So with Jupiter, we'll move from hope to hopelessness, unfounded optimism to unfounded pessimism. And so Jupiter is not always love and light and flow and goodness. Sometimes we have to pursue the truth and have it be more grounded. We have to expand to a higher level. We can say that, as Stephen Forrest says, we have to stop underestimating ourselves. We have to expand to a higher frequency, a bigger belief, a sense that we deserve more, we want more, we have to go for more. But then we have to make sure it's not overly inflated. We have to make sure there's a certain ground under it. And I think this is why the synodic cycle of Jupiter and Saturn is so important. They come together every 20 years and they create a 20-year cycle for us to live within. So that happened at the end of 2020 was the last time at 1/2 degree of Aquarius. It was the beginning of this Aquarian cycle launch. So when they came together, we get Jupiter, which says, okay, for 20 years, we're going to have a belief system that's Aquarian in nature. And then Saturn that says, okay, I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to build it in. I'm going to crash the outwarm structures in people's personal lives and in the world in general, the business world, the government world. I'm going to crash things that don't work. And I'm going to help build something new. We're going to remodel, rehab what we've done based on the old beliefs. The last Jupiter-Saturn cycle before that was in 2020. I'm sorry, 2000. It was in 2000, 20 years before, and it was in Taurus. And it had a lot to do with beliefs about the planet Earth and how the climate change crisis was much more intense than people had imagined before. And also in that cycle, we had the banks too big to fail issue that came about in 2008, but it was launched as part of the Jupiter-Saturn cycle of 2000. So with Jupiter, we can we can have a belief system that is generous and abundant and in the flow, optimistic, hopeful, and in many ways, Jupiter operating in a positive way is the core of capitalism. They say that in terms of, all of the economic cycles, what we have to have is consumer optimism. We have to have a belief that everything is expanding and everything is going well, and people are going to make more money and businesses are going to give more money to their stockholders. And so when Jupiter has that kind of expansive belief, then, there's a tendency for things to go well, and we're kind of like clicking along in the bubble. But when people become fearful and contracted and close down and move into hopelessness, lack of optimism, holding on, getting greedy, then what will happen is we will actually have more of a recession or a shutdown in some way. So these are, the way that Jupiter is operating in our world at large, but also within our own life. I mean, we'll find that when Jupiter comes into an area of life, we are asked to expand that area, to go for more, to you know be positive about what the potential are, and then in a grounded way build it out. Um, and one last thing is international cultures and foreign lands. This is the area of Jupiter. Jupiter connects to cultures, languages, everything that is about other places, because this is another way that we expand our beliefs and expand our philosophies. We get out of our little community. There are people who never leave their 10-block area. They live in a city and they don't go anywhere. And as a result, their whole concept of life is their local urban area. And yet, when you get outside of your city, your country, you go to other places and you see how other people live, what they believe in. This is very expansive, and this can help change the meaning of life for you. So our levels of development for Jupiter can be from the evolved state, where you are a philosopher, a guru, a teacher of truth. You are really living your life from a place that you have learned a great deal, you've developed it through yourself, and you're able to support others around you. You don't necessarily have to be a spiritual teacher living in an ashram, but you can be the philosopher and the spiritual teacher to your circle. And I know that many of you are doing that. And it's part of your soul's purpose to be that one that people look up to and, are inspired by. And then at an average level, we have somebody who is adventurous and humorous, freedom loving, can still be maybe a student or a teacher of ninth house subjects. Now, ninth house can, represents colleges and universities, as well as religious organizations and churches. And sometimes at that average level, we have that tendency toward the unfounded optimism, just always the rose-colored glasses, which isn't completely bad in my ninth house view, but is, we sometimes have to moderate it a little bit. And then dysfunctional side, the more shadowy side, we can find ourselves overextended, overly confident, denying our unwanted realities. We could be pretentious, greedy, hopeless, uh, not able to hold on. It's like we're the big yeast that rises and then the fingers in and collapses completely. If we think about the karmic perspective of Jupiter, Jupiter karma, we believe, can stem from failing to maintain faith in oneself and one's goals. So every planet represents, in the chart, we can think of it as a kind of a failure in prior lives or a gift. I want to say that too. Like the positive of Jupiter can be you were very abundant and generous, and now life just seems to go your way, right? But if it's a little bit difficult, then we're thinking that, you might have had self-doubt or you underestimated yourself. Maybe you were excessive and arrogant and you had inflated beliefs, improper judgment, denial of reality. And so your current life medicine is that you're, now developing a new philosophy that expands both your spiritual and your worldly values. You're going to engage in Mercury Gemini work so that you learn more, you open your mind. That's always the medicine for Jupiter. When shadow side of Jupiter, where you have these beliefs that you've just taken on and you're standing on your soapbox, and maybe you even, died for your beliefs. When you come into this life, the Gemini medicine, the opposite sign to Sagittarius, says you have to talk to more people, you have to read more books, you have to listen more. Like you're not going to just accept the belief system that your family had, which is often one of the core karmic issues that I see when I do past life work with people. And so you're going to seek growth by finding diverse perspectives and then truly becoming open-minded. So Gemini, where we've been for the last year, we have been truly doing that work. We've been expanding our belief system by becoming more knowledgeable, being curious about other things, other people, other beliefs, becoming interested in other things. We become bright and light and communicative with Gemini. Now, the shadow side of Gemini is the possibility of being superficial, glib, or ignorant, just really not paying any attention to the seriousness of what we're learning. So, Gemini can be crossword puzzles and People magazine. Not to say those things don't have their place sometimes. We all need a mental break sometimes. But if that's all we ever do, if we never go beyond the superficial and the gossip, then we don't become knowledgeable. We don't become open-minded. We become more limited. So take a moment to just think about Gemini in this last year, really from June to June. I think it came in May actually, but just think fundamentally June to June. Jupiter has been in Gemini. What have you learned? Did you expand your mind? I know that for many of us who, wanted the election to go in a different way, we have learned that we have to think about what happened in that election and why people voted the way that they voted. It's been quite a process to understand the meaning of life through election results. What else, though? What else in your life have you been rethinking and coming up with a new concept? And did you find in some way that you could expand your mind, expand what is true for you, and have a greater understanding of the world around you? Now, as Jupiter comes into Cancer, we will find ourselves working on evolving and expanding our meaning of life. And if we do it in a high frequency way, if we are evolving with it, we will find we're aligned with the divine goddess. I think of the divine goddess energy as really the ultimate highest energy of the sign of Cancer. We will be loving, unconditionally loving, nurturing, healing, secure, soft, listening, intuitive. These are all really beautiful Cancerian words. We're meant to expand into love, healing, and nurturing in this next year. Now, on an average level, we might find ourselves becoming a little more family oriented. And I will define family as however that is for you. Who is it in your life that creates a sense of nurturing and connectivity for you? You know, yes, that might be birth family, it might be a family you've created with children, but maybe it's your dogs and cats, maybe it's your houseplants, maybe it's your best friends that you count on and they've become like sisters and brothers, like cousins. You know, these days family is very, very different. And so when you are in more of an average place with family, you might find that you feel cared for and caring and giving, but you have to watch out a little bit for the control side of Cancer, where I'm doing this because I love you. I'm doing this to protect you. I'm doing this for your own good. That's kind of Cancer just getting a little squeezed, we can feel a little repressed by too much of that kind of love. And at the shadow side, Cancer can be very smothering, and one can feel insecure and needy and very controlling. And you can move into the shadow side of Cancer, which is rejection and being rejected, where the love is conditional, it's not unconditional love. So pull back and think for a moment of what planets you have in Cancer, where the sign of Cancer is in your house. It will be one house for sure, maybe two or three if you were born high latitude, north or south, where the house system, the houses can be small and big. So, wherever the sign of Cancer is, Jupiter is coming in and asking you to expand and go for more. Go for more love, go for more healing, go for a higher level of your own intuition. Go for levels of security and safety on an emotional level that maybe you never even experienced before. Think about who your family is. Do you feel loved and nourished by your family of origin? Or are you now creating and cultivating a whole new family? And as busy as we are these days, the development of a soul family doesn't happen on its own. We have to tend it. We have to care for it. We have to, make plans to see our friends and spend time listening to them and nurturing and loving, as well as being sure that it's relatively equal. We're getting back what we're giving. So in today's class, for those who are here in person, what we're going to do is look at a few charts and look at what is coming up for you. And, in this area of life that Cancer rules in your chart, what do you imagine you could do to expand that sense of unconditional love, nurturing, and safety? What will feed your heart? What will soothe your soul? And that's our lecture for today. My next talk doesn't come up until August 10th. I'm going to do a couple of things on astrology and love this year. And I hope to see some of you there. As well as I will point out the traditional astrology class starts in July. So let's look at some charts.